Okay, so hi there. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible, so I'm going to kind of run through things fairly quickly. But I have been asked a couple of times to look at basically sanding and cutting of actual parts. Again, personally, I think there are better people out there who are better at this than me, but I'll give it a try anyway. So, cutting the parts from the sprue in the first part. So I'm going to use this 1/72 bit, came from an old Apache, to give you basically the idea. Now, most people will start off with a knife, which obviously that I can't even see. Probably something along the lines of something like this, X-Acto knife. And basically what you have to do is you have to press it down as close to the surface as you can, okay, and just basically trim at it. So what you do is you get kind of close up-ish to the part, okay, and again with as little pressure as possible, just cut through. Right, now the problem here, of course, is that there's a bit of depth between the part and what you're actually resting on, okay, so it can damage the parts. It's still a handy tool to have to cut smaller parts from the sprues, okay. Now, most people then will buy something along the lines of these. Now, these are sort of cheap 99p Wish wire cutters, okay. Now, these particular ones have two blades, okay, and what happens when they cut into something is they squeeze. Now, if I can try and get the camera to focus on this instead of the background, okay, what will happen, I've used this one in particular, is as you slowly squeeze, I don't even see that goes white around the very edges as it slowly cuts through. See that? That's the stress. Okay, that's the stress of the plastic basically being squeezed from both sides. Okay, and as you cut through, okay, you'll have basically a wedge shape. Okay, so it's important if you're cutting the part to cut not directly against it. So let's just say, for example, this was actually a part, okay, that we were trying to cut away. Okay, if we're cutting right there, you've got the potential to actually damage the part. Actually, if you do it the other way around, imagine this is the part. Okay, if we cut right up against this, there's a potential we might damage the part. Okay, so we pull back from the part, okay, and we cut sort of there. See that stress again? Okay, as we go through, this really has done badly actually. There we go. And then you sand this part up to the part. Okay? Same as most people. Now, as you start getting a little more serious, you might pick up something along the lines of these. Okay, now this is a Dispace single edge cutter. Okay, there are many of them on the market now. This is the Mark III. God Hand, etc., Tamiya and so on, they all do their own now at various different prices. These are quite nice ones. I like these ones. Now these have got one blade and a stop. Okay, and what then happens, again, if you're cutting across, is if I focus again, please note there is absolutely no stress. It just slides straight through and you get a straight cut. So these are expensive, but they do kind of, they speed things up like crazy. So it means that, again, when you're cutting up against a part, rather than having to cut, say, over here somewhere, well away from the part, you can actually cut right up against the very, very edge of it. Okay, and straight through. And you're not going to damage that part at all. Okay? Now, let's just do a few of these sort of deliberately wrong. Okay? Because what you really want to be doing is you really want to be cutting away from the part that you want if you can. Let's trim these quite quickly for the camera. Okay, so we've now got these two parts now. And you've cut well away from the part so the part isn't damaged at all. And you now want to sand it down right up to the edge and keep it all nice and tidy. Now, again, most people start at one end and they get more serious as they go on. So these are probably where you'll start. Okay, these are basic nail files, 99p for a billion from Superdrug or whatever. These aren't a bad place to start. Okay, what I would suggest, especially considering they do get better these days than these, is you might want to consider something along the lines of this. Now, this is a professional one for modelers, but this is basically a nail buffer. Okay, so what you then do is use the roughest ones first to start really taking some serious wedge off of it. Make that a little bit, be all day. Okay, so you might have something along the lines of this to get rid of. Okay, so you'd use something like this at a bit of an angle. Okay, just to sand down close to it. Okay, so we've got like the majority of it away. Okay, right. Again, you don't want to go too far though, okay, or you'll end up starting to damage the part. Because once you get down to a certain level, where you're getting pretty close, switch to the smoother side. Okay, just to really finish it off. Right, and get really, really close to it. Now, again, I'll get a bit more off than that, so we need to get a little bit more. A little bit more serious. And then again, just take a little bit off. I haven't used these for a while like this. Okay, so we're pretty close now. So there is a little bit of it there, but again, I'm trying to do this quickly. But the surface is now rough. Okay, that's where you need something smoother. Okay, so you could go for something like an nail buffer. And this is virtually nothing on that side, and this is literally squeaky on that side. And that will literally bring it up to a glass-like finish. Now, once you start taking things a little more seriously, though, you may want to expand on things. So if you need something perhaps for smaller areas, you might maybe consider a set of nail files. Now, most of these, as you can see, are quite coarse grit. So again, you'd want to use these to get the majority of the material away and then switch to something smoother to get the smaller amounts away. So again, if you used something like this, okay, you got something like the nail file to actually really get the majority of it away. That's actually quite a bit. Use the nail file to get the majority of it away. Okay, and then use something smoother like that. Just to shape, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, you could work with that. Now, again, once you start taking things a little more seriously, however, you start getting into the likes of this. Now, these are sets of files and sponges, especially designed for the modeler. Okay, now again, do you need to go this far? Possibly not. It's nice to have, okay, because they will come in starter sets with various different grits running right the way through. Okay, so you've got the likes of a very, very rough grit there to take away large chunks of material. Like this bit here on the end of this. Again, you can take away a huge chunk. I can literally just rip that right the way down. In a few seconds, it's basically gone. Switch to a smoother one again, and she's pretty much gone already. The one thing, however, with this sort of thing is, again, you might want skinnier ones to get into smaller areas. They're still basically the same thing. Is what if it's a curve? Now, if it's a curve, you need to be a little bit careful with these, of course, because you can flat spot the area. So if you imagine this as a curve going around here, if you're constantly doing this, you end up with a flat area here. Okay, and that's where things like these come in. Now these are quite cushioned. Okay, and what they do is they take up the area that you're sanding. They will take away quite a lot of material. Okay, but you can get a nice, smooth, rounded edge. Okay, and again, you know, you've got things that are in between. This one's got a bit of grit to it there, but it's virtually nothing there for finishing off. Get it all really nice and smooth. And again, you could finish with something like a nail buffer if you really want it. Like actually shiny. So things like this come into their own if you're doing clear parts. Now clear parts you do have to be particularly careful of. As we were talking earlier on about stresses on plastic, I haven't got anything available here, but even with something like this, I would probably cut away from the part because they are more brittle than a normal plastic part. Okay, and it is quite easy to crack them. And usually once you do, you're in trouble because there's no sort of amount of filling, etc., that you can do with a clear part. Actually, I do, think about it. With a clear part, really, you want to be like well away from the area that you're sanding. As obviously, if you get a crack straight the way through this, you can't fill that. You're done. You're looking for a replacement. The one and only other thing that I have found recently, that again I've found a little bit more helpful when it comes to sanding certain areas, again, curved areas, etc., such as this, are scrapers. Now they're suddenly really, really popular. And again, these are for the initial part, basically taking away a lot of the plastic and reshaping things, literally. So think about things like, for example, I can find it from where I sat. This kind of area, for example, or at the front here, maybe, again, where you want it still a little bit curved there, but that obviously will be flat. So you want to try and keep that curve going on. You don't want that to flatten across there. You use something like this, and the whole point, basically, I need to be a little bit careful when I finish, is that will fit into there. Okay, and you just scrape it across, and it'll keep that nice rounded finish when you've got the majority of the material away, and then you can come in with the likes of the sponges or the buffers to really finish it off and make it look really pretty. And that is the very basics, very quickly, of cutting and sanding.